Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth.
President honored Lee with the National Medal of Arts for decades of cultural contributions. You can see him there, iconic in the lower left, as the people applaud. Lee was also at this summer's DNC, where he proudly repped the New York delegation before an audience of millions. You see him there. A lot of excitement, of course, during the roll call. He has publicly endorsed Kamala Harris for president. He's hit the trail for her in Brooklyn. He is, to use a word that is often used but not always true, a national icon.
This possibly could be the most important presidential election in the history of this country. That's how dire this is. This is not a joke. It's not funny. This is like life and death. So I urge people not registered to vote. Get with the program.
It's just common sense that you should never trust or take the word of someone who's not in the same boat as you. When he says things like, get with the program, whose program is he talking about? Certainly not ours. We have nothing to do with it. In fact, we can't get anyone to endorse our program. That's the reason why we're withdrawing from the process. But also that phrase, get with the program. Gee, where have we heard that kind of sentiment before?
I'm not putting black men down, but sometimes it's like, well, some of you Kevin Samuels following Tariq Nasheed quoting people, please look at the truth and see what's happening and get in line with some of the black women. Is majority.
So the lecturing not only continues, but it kicks into high gear, because you got the white media here with Spike Lee, and as I've told you before, please don't kid yourself. These white producers and such, they pre-interview these people before they even bring them on air. They know exactly what they're going to say before they even say it, and that's the entire point of bringing them on.
It's sad but true. Some of my brothers have been drinking that Kool-Aid. And I just hope that they get their minds straight, get their minds right in time for this election. If they're conscious, if they're aware, there's nothing that this other guy can do that's going to put us, not just black folks, but Americans, in a better position going forward. So I urge, and I got to give credit to President Obama, because he's been going really hard on the brothers. Some might think too hard, but I don't think so. We got to wake up, you know, and don't go for the okie doke.
Now, did you catch what Spike Lee said? First, he was talking about Trump wasn't going to do anything that benefits black people, and then he switched it to all Americans. Same thing Wendell Pierce did when he was on CNN, talking about Kamala Harris's so-called plan for black men. Well, it's a plan for all of America. Yeah, that's how you know that these DNC shills, they all got their talking points and they're reading from the same sheet of music. Do not demand anything specifically for black people. Stress how Kamala Harris's so-called plan, or Trump's threat to the country, isn't just against black people, it's about everyone, all Americans, not just black people. And of course, make sure to tell black people that the verbal abuse that you get, well, it's for your own good. Well, in that case then, why don't they do it to everybody? But they don't. Spike Lee praises Barack Obama for finger-wagging and lecturing and down-talking to black men, even though Spike Lee allegedly is a black man. But he doesn't seem to have a problem with the fact he thinks that's just what the moment calls for. I don't think Spike Lee has been part of, much less run, a political campaign of any sort. Especially not something as high stakes as a presidential campaign. So why is it that he's sitting here with a smile on his face, praising Barack Obama for insulting, demeaning, and condescending to black men? He thinks that's exactly what it calls for. Now, here's my question. Would Spike Lee be also co-signing it if Barack Obama was completely white instead of half white? Would he be co-signing it? I'll tell you right now, the answer is yes. You better believe that he would. I also find it perversely amusing that Spike Lee sits there and says if voters are conscious, if they're aware. Man, he was doing everything he could to tiptoe around saying woke. But then again, why would he? His hero, Barack Obama, was the one who started the mess of demonizing that word and pejoratizing it and saying, don't be woke, can't be woke stuff. Yeah, so now here's Spike Lee is the guy who had an entire movie School Days where basically you had Lawrence Fishburne run around screaming, wake up. And apparently it's Spike Lee's mind and his morals that have been put to sleep. Now, I've been out here posting videos on the internet for over a decade and a half, and in all that time, have you ever heard me praise Spike Lee? When I tell you that I don't care for movies or television or the puppets who make this mind rot, Spike Lee is a big example of why. Not him personally, but just in general. This mentality is across the board, even among these Negroes who you think are on the level. After all, he made the movie Malcolm X, right? This is the guy who made the movie Malcolm X, but Dr. John Henrik Clarke said that he had been asked to consult on the movie, and he had a low opinion of the film, and he wasn't too impressed by the filmmaker either. That's how the white media operates. They don't give you any of these high-paid, high-position posts unless they know that you're on the team. So what was Spike Lee's medal from Joe Biden really about? Basically, it's a recognition of you've been our little puppet out here, and these dumb Negroes, they actually thought that you were on their side. That's what it was about. You had 'em fooled, Spike. You had 'em fooled. But as far as the rest of Spike Lee's comments, such as they are, it was Spike Lee being, well, Spike Lee. Amazing how all it takes is for the president to give him a medal, and he's Captain America, talking about good Americans and such. Also talking about how nothing Trump does is going to make black people's lives any better. It's as if he didn't know that the number of killings committed by the police has spiked, pun intended, after Biden was elected president. And that number is higher than it ever was under Trump, and those killings have only gone up every single year of the Biden-Harris administration. So you see Spike Lee out there proud to be a delegate for the Democrats from New York. Somebody ought to ask Brother Spike, how many black people have been killed by the police on your buddy Kamala Harris's watch? And then ask him to explain, how are things better now on that front? I struggle to find where these alleged improvements have been under the Biden-Harris administration, and apparently Spike Lee struggles with it too, because he wasn't able to actually tell us anything that was better. In fact, none of these mouthpieces can. They all just sit there and say, things are going to be worse under Trump. It's not going to be any better under Trump. Magic Johnson, he's not going to make your lives any better. The question is, has Kamala Harris? They can't tell us. Apparently, they don't think so either. Now, this video is what for Spike Lee has tragically become typical. Rambling, barely forming any coherent sentences, but he got a medal from Biden for the arts, and he's out here hobnobbing with Kamala Harris because for black celebrities, it's about building and sustaining their own cult of fame. Being at the right parties, PR stunts, photo ops, that's the world they live in. And their survival isn't based on group economics. They work for white media companies, so their survival is based on self-interest, not group interest. And they try to play that game, at least until the white media inevitably gives them their pink slip. But even if you confront Spike Lee on this stuff, the problem with the bootlick is they've always got some deflection, some dodge, some word salad that they try to use. Now, isn't it interesting, or rather, isn't it typical, that over the course of the last week and a half or so, as Barack Obama's little temper tantrum went viral, you've had a number of TV shows that have been talking about this, but only one actually had somebody who took Obama to task and called this stuff what it is. Everybody else, everyone else, especially the black men who the white media's had on camera commenting about this, they've all co-signed what Obama said. And they all echo the idea that black men, they're just weaker. There's something wrong with them if they don't like being insulted. Well, there's something wrong with them. That's what the entire narrative has been. That's how you know that there's a program at work here. This is all about, we're going to try to break these black men down through just insulting them. But of course, the opposite has been happening. Now remember what I've been telling you about how crucial it is to avoid these white liberals and white leftists who try to call themselves speaking on our issues, because it's absolutely no accident that it was Ari Melber, of course, who MSNBC chose to platform this stuff. I've been warning you about people like him. His ridiculous quoting of rap lyrics and name-dropping hip-hop figures, it's beyond cringe. But his purpose is to be the wannabe hip white guy. He's corny, but he's also down. And using this subterfuge, he interviews compliant bootlicks like Charlemagne the Fraud and others like Spike Lee, who toe the line and repeat the same stale lies. And because it comes from this faux wigger, Melber gets less opposition than someone like him should. I told you a few days ago about how Wendell Pierce was bootlicking to beat the band, praising Kamala's do-nothing so-called plan for black men. He was on CNN with that, but now we see Spike Lee, another Negro in Hollywood, doing the same thing, only he went beyond Wendell Pierce. He went beyond, well, I had some criticism for the president, but he called me and we talked about it and I licked his boots to a mirror shine. He went beyond that. Spike Lee's sitting here saying, oh, black men need to be hearing this. This is what's called for. See what happens? This is the very definition of an abusive relationship. And the white media's putting this out there. They would never bring anyone on air to say that Asians need to be rhetorically slapped in the face or talked down to. They definitely wouldn't do that about Jewish voters or about white men. They wouldn't do that at all. But they make it a point to do that about black men. And as we've always told you, they always send in some Negroes to break the ice for them. Whenever it's time for them to begin some major anti-black offensive, they always make sure that there's some black person who's going to be the first one to get sent out there. When it came time to attack woke, it was Barack Obama who was leading the charge on that, and now we got Spike Lee showing his true colors. Then again, you don't have to be too smart to figure that out. I mean, he's part of Hollywood. What do you expect? And this is what they're saying. Malcolm, who clearly Spike Lee didn't care much for, he warned us against allowing these celebrities to be presented as spokespeople for you and me, and this is the reason why. It comes down to money. Who's paying them? If they're getting their daily bread from the white media, that means they're on the take, even the ones who try to talk a good game. As the Bible says, wheresoever a man's fortune is, that's where his heart is too. And we know exactly where Spike Lee's fortune is at. It's in the hands of the good white media and these days, the white political establishment. Tragically, this two-faced cowardice and duplicity isn't limited to the clowns that you see bootlicking for the white media. Time and time again, we keep having the same cast of characters, the usual suspects who tell you and me that we can't do anything that's strictly in our own interest. We have to sit on our hands or otherwise obey the dominant society. The dominant society will never do anything that empowers us, because they successfully created a zero-sum game, one that favors only them. They stole our power because they themselves had very little of it, and any change to that equation of a necessity must reduce their power. But then again, if you have a thief who's burgled every home on the block and taken all the residents' belongings, including yours, and put them in his house, he'll brag about how rich he is and about how hard he had to work. Sure, breaking into people's houses every day and stealing everything they have is hard work, but it's not honest work, and that's what makes it wrong. Now, if you've been the victim of a burglary and you find out who the thief is and where your belongings are, obviously you're going to get on that immediately that very second. And if some of your neighbors are also victims of this same thief and they've lost their property to this criminal, you'll have an instant mob, and a righteous one at that. Now, what if some of your neighbors, rather than wanting to produce justice and reclaim what's theirs and punish the criminal, instead they begin giving you reasons why they don't think it'll work? The criminal may try to fight you, they'll say. Or, well, is it that important, they ask? Or, they don't think it will work. The first thing you may notice is that these cowardly neighbors, they don't work very hard themselves. They've never stood up for themselves, and basically they live their lives defeated. They've never strived for anything, ever. All they serve to do is to try to demoralize you into accepting injustice. When the neighbors get over their fear of this thief and finally band together to punish him and reclaim their stolen property, what would the reaction be if 2 or 3 of the neighbors began screaming, "You can't do that! You're going to mess things up for the rest of us!" This is where the Wendell Pierces and the Spike Lees come from. Now, if this happened, the neighbors telling you you're going to mess things up for the rest of us, you would immediately recognize that these objections are coming from people who are in collusion with the thief. Taking back what's yours and punishing the criminal, that can't mess anything up for anyone who isn't a co-conspirator. The purpose of these neighbors is to dispel and dissipate the energy and force that you've assembled to produce justice. The point of my analogy, I think, is clear. The problem that we face is not just among black bootlicks who are on the take for the white media. We also have the same problem among black society in general. On the one hand, we have sellouts, bootlicking backstabbers who are working with the enemy, who repeat all their lies and tell us that not overthrowing the status quo will somehow lead to a change in our condition. And on the other hand, you have apathetic losers who have never waged a fight a day in their lives. They've resigned themselves to their fate, which is defeat, and they want you to join them. The apathetic coward and the collaborating bootlick both have the same thing in common. They're scared of offending white power. The bootlick is scared of white power because they want to get something from it. And the apathetic coward is scared of white power because they're terrified that they're going to lose what little they think they have. Fear is like cancer. Once it gets a hold of you, it metastasizes and spreads until it ultimately kills the host. But when it comes to fear, this form of cancer is contagious. I told you 4 years ago to stop moving by fear and to move by force. I laid out how it was illegitimate to fear Trump winning re-election because he wasn't doing or going to do anything that Obama hadn't already done, and that the Democrats hadn't been allowing to happen all along. What black people fail to understand, too many black folks, is that what's happening here is a continuity of policy. It's no different than when it comes to the U.S. and Israel. Does it matter if you vote Democrat or Republican on Israel? Of course not. Both of the major parties are completely and thoroughly devoted to defending Israel no matter what, and when it comes time to criticize them, neither party will do so. So what does that tell you? They're both on the exact same page. That's continuity of policy. It doesn't matter who's in the White House or who's in control of Congress. The policy on that will never change. Well, the same thing goes for black people. There's complete and thorough continuity of policy. The Democrats and Republicans may differ, even if only rhetorically, when it comes to issues like abortion and immigration and such, but they're doing that because of the extent that it affects their white constituents. But when it comes to black people, both of the major parties are on the exact same page, and you can see by what they actually do. That's the point that I was trying to make 4 years ago, when I tried to appeal to people's logic and intellect. But the truth of the matter is, when people are scared, they stop thinking, and that's why white power works day and night to keep you in a perpetual state of fear and anxiety. And they trot out these bought and paid for bootlicks like Wendell Pierce and Spike Lee to tell you to be afraid. Be very afraid. This is how white power has managed to keep so many black people in line for so many decades without firing a single shot. They carry out or create 2 high-profile examples of individuals who they've harmed, who they've killed or wrecked the lives of, and then they point the finger at you and say, you'll be next if you get out of line. And a lot of black folks just go right along with it. But if you take a look at the uprisings of 2020, you had people taking to the streets and standing up to the white supremacists. Didn't matter if they were in government or not. And did you see the white supremacists slaughtering people in the streets? No, you saw the white supremacists not just back down, but you saw the bastards run away. Now, what does that tell you? The greatest single factor in the fall of white supremacy is not going to come down to the white supremacists themselves. It's going to come down to us and how we move and what we do. And that's the reason why we can't afford to be listening to these bootlicks. Spike Lee's mindless cheerleading for the Democrats would only make sense if Obama, Biden, or Harris actually did anything for us. They haven't. And under these circumstances, what's going on now is absolutely catastrophic. Barack Obama came on the scene saying he wasn't doing anything for black people. Kamala Harris doubled down on that and said, I'm not going to do anything that only benefits black people. And now we have open abuse at the hands, or rather mouth, of Obama going on, and you got Spike Lee cheerleading for that. So we've gone from, we're not going to do anything for you, to, you dumb niggers, you're a bunch of sexists if you don't do as we say. And you got Spike Lee co-signing that, openly endorsing, verbally abusing, and castigating black voters, which opens the door for everybody non-black to do the exact same thing. The point of the matter is this: how you live your life comes down to footwear. No, I don't mean whether you wear Nike or Reebok. I mean whether you choose to put on combat boots or running shoes. If you're prepared to fight and stand on business, then lace up your boots and get to work. On the other hand, if you've decided to make excuses and lies to make yourself feel better about your own cowardice, then put on your running shoes. But just understand, at some point the soldier gets to take off his boots when the war is won. The coward who chooses to put on running shoes, they have to keep running forever. And if there's anything we should have learned from the tethers, it's that people who practice running never get to stop. They'll tell themselves lies so they can live with what cowards they've become, but they know the truth. And so does everyone else. When it comes to things like elections, you notice that I don't try to tell you how to vote. What I do instead is I tell you to look at the world as it is and make a decision for yourself. Look at the facts. Don't let me tell you what they are, and definitely don't let Spike Lee do it. But I'm certain that if you actually look at the facts as they are, and not let somebody tell you how you should feel, then what's going to happen is you're going to realize that a lot of this stuff that you've been told isn't true. And you got people on both sides who are just trying to manipulate you for their own interest. And that being the case, you're supposed to engage your brain whenever it's time to evaluate something, not your feelings. Only a fool is afraid to do that. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Lisa Taylor, Bobby Ross, Frederica Moore, Cynthia Nixon, and Faith Speaks Life. Salute to them, and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.